Welcome to Cicada Rising, where fear takes flight and the truth lies in the shadows. Prepare to be captivated by true accounts of the supernatural, eerie encounters, and unexplained mysteries. Brace yourself for a journey into the shadows, where every whisper and every creak could be a harbinger of something beyond comprehension. Now let's begin. It's so hard being a single mother. I have the most wonderful children in the world. Alex is 11 years old and Emma is 8. Raising them has been the greatest honor of my life. Not that it hasn't been difficult at times. They're children, so they don't always listen. They get into things they shouldn't and mess with things I'd rather they didn't. I know, that's totally normal, and I don't normally draw hard lines. I prefer to let them experiment and learn. Of course, their experiments aren't always clean, and frankly, it's harder cleaning up after them than it used to be, but they're worth it. Of course, it would be easier with 2 parents. Their dad disappeared when they were kids, never to be heard from again. He wasn't a good man, and they've already mostly forgotten the horrors of their childhoods. But some days I wonder if they're losing out on a lot by not having him here. Other days I just hate him. I try to make up for what they're missing out on, but it's hard. I do my best, but I can't be a dad. A couple of years ago I was so distraught that I didn't know how to go on, but it passed and I've settled into a groove. Things get better if you just hang in, and seeing their faces every day makes it worth all of the struggle. I do sometimes wonder if they're missing out on things, stuck in this house with me. I'm a big believer in socialization, and I know it would be good for them to spend more time with the neighborhood kids. It can't be great always being stuck with their mom, and I'm sure homeschooling isn't always the most fun, but it's the best I can do right now. For their sake, I hope that eventually things will get better. Lately, I've been having trouble getting Alex in particular to do what he's told. I know he's just naturally curious and it's normal, but he's starting to get really bad at listening. He always wants to play with knives, run with scissors, go into the basement, sometimes all at the same time. I've told him that these activities are dangerous and that he needs to leave sharp objects alone and stay away from the basement, but it's like that just makes it worse. I'm at my wit's end here. Last night I went downstairs and found Alex missing and the basement door open. Crap. I rushed downstairs, but I was too late. There was Alex, frozen at the bottom of the stairs, traumatized. I guided him back up the stairs and closed the door behind him. It will take him some time to get back to normal, but I love him, and I'm not going anywhere. And neither is he. Our bodies swinging from the rafters in the basement guarantee that Alex, Emma, and I will be here, together, forever. Back in 1992, my brother Boone went missing. Our family had always lived in North Dakota, but Boone had always dreamed of leaving. In 1990, Boone was accepted to the University of Miami in South Florida. His freshman year, he met a couple good friends, and they all moved into a little beach bungalow their first summer. He had been living there since. In late August of 1992, Boone called home and I answered. It was around 1 a.m. and he sounded frantic. He said the hurricane that was about to hit was going to be bad, and that he was leaving to come home. He said something was wrong, that he could feel it building around him in the air. I told him the plan. I told him to meet me at the first Greyhound bus station past the Florida-Georgia border, and we could drive back home together. I wanted to make sure he was safe because he was really scaring me. Boone said he would call home again as soon as he got to the bus station. I told him I would already be en route, so just let Mom know he was safe and waiting for me. I packed a small bag and cash, left my mom a note, and biked to the bus station. I was really freaked out. Though my brother was a dreamer and creative, he wasn't one to panic or really to fright easily. I got on the bus and took note of the only people there immediately. Only 4 others, 2 pairs of male and female companions. The closer pair was to the right, in the first row behind the driver. The woman looked frightened. The man looked as if he was trying to keep his demeanor calm. The other couple was even more strange. They sat towards the back on the left side. The man was sleeping against the window. But the woman had giant dark eyes. They were glassy and shiny. She looked as if I had just interrupted her crying over a funeral wake. Her mouth was open though, slack-jawed, and I could see too many teeth. She would not take her eyes off me. I could almost feel them poking the back of my head as I sat down 2 rows behind the first couple. The bus took off, and I tried to think of anything but my brother and the strange lady staring at me. I pulled out a book and started to read. I didn't hear the first plinking sounds until we were in South Dakota a few hours later. It was faint over the background noise, but it was distinct on the plastic floor. As day broke and we took our first stop, I decided to get off to buy a couple snacks and relieve myself in the bathroom. I didn't turn around when I stood up, just exited. When I returned to the bus, I took a deep breath and stepped on, hoping the woman had fallen asleep or, better yet, gotten off. No. Instead, her companion seemed to have disappeared, as well as the other couple. It seemed as though the woman hadn't even moved. But she just stared at me. I took my spot where the other couple had been sitting before and tried to forget she was still on the bus. The noise seemed to go on for hours, like an irregular, leaky faucet, dripping pebbles onto linoleum. When we reached Tennessee, she got off the bus, but as she passed me, she touched my shoulder and said, "Not yet." I couldn't bring myself to even glance at her. I was trying not to shake out of my skin. Her voice was so hollow and raspy, like it belonged to a broken drive-through speaker. She smiled and exited. I thought she might break her neck to continue staring at me as she left. As soon as the bus lurched forward, I got up and went to where the woman had been sitting, staring. I looked down and saw a pile of human and animal teeth. The man who I had thought left the bus previously was slumped in the seat, almost falling forward to the floor. When we got to the next station, the bus driver called the police and I was transferred to a new bus. The whole situation was really unsettling to me. When I got to the final Greyhound station in Georgia, I looked around for my brother. His car wasn't there, and I didn't see him anywhere. I called home at the payphone and Mom answered. I asked if Boone had called and she said he hadn't. So I waited. I waited a full day at the station. He never showed. I called home again and Mom still hadn't gotten a phone call either. I called Boone's house. The line just rang and rang and rang. I broke down crying on the bench. I got back home and Mom told me some of the news she had seen. Hurricane Andrew had swept through South Florida and ravaged the state. There were deaths and many reported missing. My mom called the school when it reopened for classes to see if Boone had shown up, to which they told us no. We called the police and filed a missing persons report. My mom and I went down to Florida together the next week to help in searching for Boone and the others, including his roommates. We never found anyone, or Boone. We still don't know what happened to him to this day. His car was never seen, and because his roommates were missing too, we could never figure out where he last was. In fact, most of their home had been destroyed, and most of Boone's personal items were either swept away, or he had taken with him. Since then, I have suffered with debilitating nightmares that make sleep basically impossible. I have flashbacks to seeing the woman on the bus, the dead man, Boone, the destruction of the hurricane. It just comes back and hits me whenever I'm awake. I spent the first year after Boone went missing in bed, hardly eating, catatonic. But as time marched on, the images and nightmares slowly, and I mean slowly, started to fade, and I could begin to recall the better times I had shared with Boone. Today, I visited the headstone my mom had made last year in honor of Boone. It was early evening. I remember as I walked up to his headstone, I could see a stack of something on it that wasn't there before. As I got near, I pushed aside the flowers and I noticed it was a pile of teeth. When I examined further, I noticed animal teeth as well. I stood up and the woman from the bus more than 30 years ago was standing in front of me. She was exactly as I remembered from all my nightmares. All she said was, "Soon." So I've always loved scary stuff. Films, books, and games, but never believed in anything paranormal. Had some weird stuff happen, but I'd ignore it and shrug it off. Must be a rational explanation. Then a few years ago, my friend wanted to do one of those paranormal ghost hunts that was taking place in our local area. I thought, why not? I've watched loads of TV ghost hunts. Will probably be fun, and it was for the most part. The building we went to had a really horrible history, but there was a big roaring fire and comfy seats, and the atmosphere was cozy rather than scary. They even fed us loads of tasty food. It felt like we had gathered round to tell scary stories. I never felt frightened once. A couple of strange things happened, and a spirit box clearly said my name, but that definitely wasn't evidence of the paranormal. I put it down to coincidence. In the middle of the night, the investigators got a Ouija board out and asked for volunteers. My friend and another person in the group wanted to do it, so I decided to join in too. It started spelling out words almost immediately, and I didn't pay much attention to what it said, because I was so focused on watching the other two to catch them out moving the pointer. I wasn't moving it, so obviously it was one of them. Except I was paying such close attention, I realized there were times only my finger was touching the pointer and it still moved. I didn't understand how and asked to look at the board at the end because I was convinced there must be magnets or something. As soon as it was done, out of nowhere I realized I was really, really tired. Just totally exhausted. One of the people in charge of the group who said he was a psychic seemed really concerned, and I had to reassure him I just wasn't used to being up at that hour. I'd been up since before 6 a.m., and it was now 4 a.m.-ish, so I just wanted my bed and chose to leave early. I got home, gave my dog some attention, and went to sleep. The next morning I heard some weird noises that seemed to be coming from the door when I was in the bathroom. Thought it was quite weird, but ignored it. Probably a draft or a vibration from somewhere. I went into my bedroom and started getting dressed. Heard my dog being silly on the other side of the bed behind me. He was a German Shepherd and very big, so he was making quite a bit of noise. Sounded like he was digging under my bed. I turned around to talk to him and see what he was doing, and he wasn't there. I checked under the bed and all round the room, nothing. My dog was downstairs. This actually freaked me out because I definitely know what I heard. Over the next couple of weeks I checked for mice because what else could it have been? Smaller things started to happen. From stuff like being certain I saw something move on the other side of a room in the corner of my eye, to strange noises. Sometimes things would just fall. A book falling off the table or a stack of plates clattering on the drying rack. I ignored a lot of this. Oh, I just heard a plate hit against another plate in the kitchen? Must be a draft in there or something. Other stuff I couldn't explain. Once I was home alone, I'd just cleaned around the house and had been chilling on the sofa watching TV. When I decided to get a drink or whatever, I walked in the kitchen and saw some fruit roll the length of the counter. The fruit bowl is tall, and there's no way any fruit could tumble out. It was only about a third of the way full. Nobody else was in the kitchen. I couldn't explain it. Some things that happened were frightening. I'd be home alone and hear someone walking around upstairs. It was a different sound to the usual creaks. More than once I woke up to my dog standing in the doorway of my bedroom growling. He wasn't much of a growler and it terrified me. I'd go check expecting an intruder. The worst thing by far that happened was the last. Weekend morning, really bright and sunny. I woke up super early, let my dog outside, and we went back up to bed. I had a coffee and a book and was just planning on chilling out for a bit. After a bit, my boy jumped off the bed and looked out of the bedroom doorway, then just laid down, so I went back to my coffee and book. Then, out of nowhere, there was the loudest crash that came from the loft. I jumped, my dog jumped up, and then it sounded like something was falling down the loft staircase. There was noises of running up and down the stairs, and it's like all hell broke loose. I could have sworn there was at least 20 people up there just throwing things as hard as they could off the floor and walls, kicking things and running around like crazy. I could hear things smashing. It went on for a while as well. I was absolutely terrified. Could have sworn there were people up there. I heard running on the stairs but couldn't see anyone. When it stopped, neither of us dared move. I didn't take my eyes off the stairs and eventually went up with my phone ready to call emergency services. But there was nobody there and nothing was out of place. I've got no explanation. I posted here and someone reached out. Told me to ignore it as best as I could and it would go away. It did, and this was years ago. I'm in the same house though, and recently had a few weird experiences happen that's left me feeling unsure. Not really sure why I've typed all this up, really. I read somewhere that weird experiences can restart at any time. and that really freaks me out. Has anyone else had a long break and things start up again? The stuff that happened before doesn't even seem real. My parents were looking for a new home. They were both about to enter retirement, and I was no longer living with them. Their current house was just too big, and the stairs were too much for my dad. "I found it!" my mom shouted. Her eyes lit up with excitement, focused on the computer screen. "The perfect house," she sighed with a smile still on her face. "That's great, my mom." I took a look at the screen. Looks charming. Old, but not in a bad way. I chuckled. It was June now, and my parents finally had possession. I offered to help unpack. I wanted my parents to have a smooth transition to the new house. "Come on in." My mom opened the door with a glass of wine held out to me. Ooh, Merlot, my favorite. I grabbed the glass and took my shoes off. I could already smell my mom's chili. "Dad can't help out much. It'll probably be just you doing the heavy stuff," my mom shouted, already on her way to the kitchen. "But I got wine and some chili going." "I'll start unpacking," I said with a chipper tone, as I saw Dad having a nap on the couch. Hours later, and I was just about done. I grabbed the last box. I opened it and saw something I'd never seen before. It was a painting. It looked like a woman, with her hands and head touching the wall. Blood was dripping from the woman's forehead as if she'd been smashing her head. "Hey, Mom, what is this painting?" I felt chills. "Oh, that was here when we got here. Kind of creepy, huh?" She laughed. "It was in this box with your stuff, though." Haha. "Okay, funny guy. No, I found it earlier. Weird. I couldn't stop looking." Mom was washing the chili pot. I was just getting ready to leave. I went to put my shoes on. "Good night." I barely got the words out. "Where do you think you're going?" my mom said in a flat tone, startling me. It didn't sound like a question. She had her head pressed against the mirror, hands on either side of her head. "Holy shit. You scared me, Mom. I didn't see you there." My heart racing now. "You've had too much to drink. Stay the night." "I have work in the morning, Mom," I said nervously. Just then I noticed it. My mom was bleeding from her forehead, still against the mirror. "Mom, you're bleeding," I stuttered. "Dad, there's something wrong." I stopped. I could see my dad on the floor. "You know what I hate," my mom said in a guttural tone. "You don't know respect." What do you talk?" I could barely speak. I then realized my mom was also on the floor next to my dad. Whoever, or whatever this was not my mom. Every light in the house went black and the locks shut. I was here, first. My parents' house is haunted, and it permanently damaged me. It is also affecting other inhabitants of the house. So, some data on the house. It was built by a rich noble family in 1674 in a little village in northern Germany as part of a bigger estate. It was supposed to house the servants, workers, gardeners, etc. Sadly, the construction of the main building was never started in the first place as money ran out. So after a few years, what has been built was sold to another family and another one, and so on. The last family that owned it, the family's father, was very rich and had a lot of money in America. 1928 happened, and well, he shot himself in the head in order to not dishonor his family. The house was never the same after that. After World War II, the house was taken over by the GDR and repurposed. It housed a kindergarten, a shop, and communal government. After Germany's reunification, it was left empty. Until in 2000 to 2001, my parents bought it for very cheap because, well, it was in shambles. It needed a lot of work done. But my parents took the challenge and made this house a home. I've had a great childhood there, most of the time at least. And my sister moved back in with my parents because there is just so much room. She is going to inherit it someday, so it'll stay in the family. It all sounds like a happy ever after story, but not all people under that roof are alive. It started when I was 5 to 6 years old. I was sleeping alone in my parents' bed when suddenly it started shaking. I thought that this wasn't real, and the earth must be shaking. Well, Imagine my surprise when I looked around the room and down the bed and saw it floating around 3 to 4 centimeters off the ground. I jumped off of it and ran to my parents, but as you can imagine, the bed was back to normal when I showed them. Another day, I was going into a room where a big goat head hangs on one of the walls. It is made out of clay and always kinda creeped me out because it follows you with its eyes. But this day, I will never forget, it was broad daylight. It spoke to me. It called out to me and said, in German of course, "Hello, hello, little boy. Come here." That scared the shit out of me and I ran away. The head is still hanging there, and I've had multiple encounters with it. Sometimes its eyes look somewhere else and then move to look at you. It never spoke again though. When I was around 10, a buddy and I took pictures for fun with an old camera. Sadly, this camera does not exist anymore. We captured white smoke coming out of the chimneys, even though none of the ovens were lit. This was in high summer. I've heard voices multiple times in certain rooms of the house between these major events. Every time I walked in the house at night, it felt like something was following me. Sometimes something crept up to me and I had to run away. It wasn't pleasant. And of course, all different kinds of sounds, steps, doors slamming, drawers opening, the whole shebang. I was 12 when I first saw him. I didn't sleep very well that night. I stood up from my bed and wanted to go to my parents. Already when I took my first step, I felt so cold, and the room was darker than ever before. I went to my drawer and turned on the light. It worked, but it didn't flood the room as usual. I walked to the door that led to my parents' room, opened it, but decided to have a last look back. I wish I didn't. I saw him coming out of the wall, a dark figure. It looked like a Dementor from Harry Potter, but I didn't know anything about Harry Potter at that time, with long, tree-like fingers. It reached after me and opened its mouth. I ran for my life and slept with my parents that night. I looked up photos of the man who killed himself in the house, and it had to be him. At 16 years old, I was talking to an ex on the phone and told her the story and about the man. Suddenly, the room filled with heavy breathing, and my phone started to stutter. It seems he didn't like what I said. We moved into another part of the house years later, and I got a new room. My parents' room wasn't renovated at the time, so I got to move in before them. At night, I woke up from a good sleep, sat up, and looked at my door. My door had 2 blurred windows installed at the top. I saw multiple pairs of eyes staring me down. Then it began. Something was shaking the door and hammering like crazy. At this time, I'd become a Norse pagan. I've prepped the door with runes and prayed to the gods. I stood up and shouted at the door, "Go away, it's just me, you idiot." It stopped. It felt like the ghost took me for an intruder, but realized he was mistaken. My sister's boyfriend has also seen a dark figure in the barn, and another figure walking past windows and doors, even in daylight. He moved in later than all of us, of course, so he wasn't used to it. We've all seen it. It's part of the house. We all know he is there. No one doubts it. Now, how has this damaged me? For as long as I remember, I saw eyes everywhere in the house. They were looking at me or each other. When there were many eyes, the energy was very bad and something was about to happen. I've moved out about 1.5 years ago. My life has never been better. I don't see any weird stuff anymore anywhere. The building I live in now is clean and I've smoked out my flat. Of course, this could all be in my head. Yes, maybe I am mentally ill. I don't know, it's not affecting me negatively right now. I've lived part at home, part in boarding school for 5 years until I graduated school. When I was in boarding school, I've never seen anything. Only when I was in this house or cemeteries. Should I see a therapist about all this? Do you think my parents should do something about the man? Thank you for listening. I've always been one to say that can't be true or prove it when something iffy happens, but I'm now a believer. It wasn't too late, maybe 6 or 7 p.m., about the time kids get home from after-school activities, but it's winter, so it is still pretty dark outside. I'm home alone watching scary movies because why wouldn't I be? When I hear a knock on my door, not gonna lie, it kinda got me because it happened at the perfect time. I go look, and it's my neighbor's kid. He said his phone died and he left his keys in the house and wanted to call his mom. He calls and we both talk to her. At least I thought so. I tell her not to worry, I'll give him a snack, make him do his homework, and we can watch some TV till she gets off work. I've always been like an uncle to him and a brother to his mom, so taking care of him is normal for me. He's like 16, by the way, so being home alone wouldn't be that big of a deal. A few hours go by, almost time for her to get off work. We finish the show and I pack him some food to take to his mom. We tried to call to see when she'd be back, and no answer, so I figured we'd wait till we saw her car pull up to the garage. Another hour goes by and I'm a little worried, because of how bad it is outside. But that's also why I'm assuming it's taking so long to get home. I make a joke about how maybe she got pulled over and he can just sleep here tonight so he can go to school in the morning. A few more hours go by, and now I'm really worried. While he's in the other room asleep, I start calling hospitals and jails to really find out what's going on. But no one has her there tonight. So I call her job to see if she's still working, only to find out that she didn't show up today. Now I'm really getting scared, thinking something happened to her on the way to work and no one has found her yet. I get ready to go do a search myself. I know I might not find anything, but it's worth a shot. Glad I did because I see her car. So now I'm thinking she probably got home and didn't want to wake him, and somehow we just missed her. So I go back inside and go to ask him if he wanted to stay or go to his own bed. But he's not there anymore, so that answer's under question. Something still feels off, but since all the boxes are checked, I never mind it. The next morning, another knock on my door wakes me up. It's the police asking if I've heard anything last night. I'm confused because I was up till about midnight and didn't hear a thing. So I asked, why? Did anything happen? He informed me that my neighbor's ex-husband picked up his son from school when it let out at 3, took him home, then proceeded to kill the son, ex-wife, and then himself. I'm in shock, but trying not to sound like a crazy person, I kept last night to myself, thinking they got the times wrong somehow, and it happened after I went to bed. I knew that bad feeling happened for a reason, but I could never imagine this. I then go to the kitchen to get some water, and the container that I'm sure I put in his bag was still on the counter. I go through my phone, and the call that I was a part of yesterday wasn't logged. The second one was, but not the one he dialed. Honestly, I think I'm going crazy, so I go to take a shower and try to get my mind busy on something so I'm not so disturbed. When I get out, smudged on the mirror reads, "Goodbye, and thanks for taking care of me one last time." As we conclude this bone-chilling installment of Cicada Rising, we urge you to join our community by liking, sharing, and subscribing. To submit your own stories, contact us at mhpicadon@gmail.com, including Cicada Rising in the subject line. Until our paths cross again, remember, the darkness is only as frightening as the secrets it conceals. Stay vigilant, stay connected, and keep the fear alive with Cicada Rising.